Who is going to win Super Bowl 58? That is the $1 million question. Amir, you're joining the show today. You took last week off, but of course, Pro Bowl weekend, that is what that's for. But today, we're not only going to give you guys our prediction for that game, the Chiefs-Niners rematch in the Super Bowl, but we're also going to dive more into the game, give you our top 10 players, our hot takes. We're going to look into some prop bets. We're going to look into a lot as far as this weekend in Super Bowl 58. As always, the comment section is a safe place. So if you want to give us your predictions along the way, of course, alongside the episode, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to see what you guys have to think of course, going into this weekend. But Amir, you're joining us here. How you doing on this Tuesday morning? Of course, it's a little bit different here.
I'm doing great, man. The season's coming to an end. It's the big game, the most exciting game of the year. I think, seeing all the build up to this game, seeing, the pregame press conferences, them having people at the stadium, having the players out, I think this is going to be an amazing Super Bowl. Even though America might not want it, me personally, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about that here. As last week, or 2 weeks ago, rather, in the AFC and NFC title games, Amir, I was 2-0. Of course, I'm on a 6-game win streak when it comes to the playoffs. You were 1-1. Of course, you took a little bit of a risk there going with the Baltimore Ravens on the season, though. You see our records at the bottom of the screen. We're not going to hit that 200 win mark, which was the goal prior to the year, at least for me, right? But then we get into the game, and I'm just going to start here talking about the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. So stick with me here because I'm sure you guys have heard this spiel a million times. But if you guys haven't, here it is. Patrick Mahomes is 28 years old. In his 6 years as a starter, he has been to 6 AFC title games. He's been to 4 different Super Bowls, and he has 2 playoff losses. Those 2 playoff losses come to, in my opinion, to the best player of all time in Tom Brady. Of course, Tom Brady handed him his first regular season loss, postseason loss, and Super Bowl loss, Amir. So that's pretty unique there. But then his second playoff loss comes against, in my opinion, the second best player in football when he's healthy, and Joe Burrow. That could be a hot take, but I think, of course, quarterback's the most important position, and I think the second best quarterback is Joe Burrow. But then we dive into this matchup here against the Niners, of course, rematch from a few years ago. But over the last 19 Super Bowls, Amir, the team that wears white going into the Super Bowl is
Yeah.
16-3. Who was wearing white in this game? The San Francisco 49ers. Of course, they had a better record. They got and the better seed. So they got to choose which jersey they wanted to wear in this matchup. So they chose white. Of course, history is on their side. However, Amir, the last time a team won a Super Bowl not wearing white as their primary color was Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs just a few years ago. But your thoughts here about this matchup, Amir? A lot of interesting things, of course, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, maybe not the matchup we wanted, but it's the matchup we got here. So your thoughts about this matchup?
Yes, this was a matchup exactly I wanted. And, I literally waited to the last possible second to make this pick. And for me, I'm all about sticking it out. San Fran has been my favorite for the past almost 2 months now, as you guys can see on the episodes. And so, I'm gonna go and stick with that pick. Even though I bet against Mahomes for, the third straight week now. And I might pay for it because personally I'm not confident in this game. The Chiefs defense is looking amazing. I'm not even more so worried about Mahomes. Obviously he's great, he's amazing, but I'm worried about that Chiefs defense. I mean, they absolutely made the Ravens offense looked non-existent. They shut the run game completely down. They had Lamar looking like he forgot how to play football. It was absolutely crazy. And for San Fran, overall, their team is more complete. You know, and I'm honestly just gonna stick with them. I'm a big Brock Purdy believer. I'm a Brock Purdy stan. I'm not gonna say anything off the wall and say he's a top 5 quarterback. I think he's probably on the tail end of a top 10 quarterback. But I think this team is overall complete. And I say these past 2 weeks, with them kind of coming back in games, gaining that confidence. I mean, the second half against the Lions, they looked like their confidence was at an all-time high.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be huge for them in this game.
Yeah. I think you put 2 more years of experience under Jordan Love. They might not even be past the first round of the playoffs or the second round of the
Yeah.
playoffs. But they're here, right? And like you mentioned, there 2 come from behind victories. And they kind of have switched the narrative because this is a team, Amir, where we saw the stats throughout the entire
Yeah.
season and throughout Shanahan's entire career as a coach here in San Fran. Whenever this team goes down early, more times than not, they lose the game. It's like
Over.
if they fall behind early, they can't really bounce back. They can't respond. They've done that. And when it matters most here in back-to-back playoff weeks against 2 very good playoff teams, right? Packers first ever 7 seed to win a playoff game in NFL history. Of course, they have a top 2 quarterback in the NFL today. Of course, I'm just
Oh
joking.
my gosh.
But then, of course, Detroit. Of course, Detroit's a very well-rounded team, and I mean, one or two field goals away from probably being in this exact situation here. But you're going with San Fran here, and I will say before I make my prediction, this game scares me because this reminds me of when the Chiefs were trying to go back to back a couple years ago when they went and they played Tom Brady and that Tampa Bay Buccaneers team.
Yeah.
I think the reason why Tampa Bay won that game is because they were in your face and they got to the quarterback. They applied pressure. There was no pass protection from the Kansas City Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes had to be Superman. I mean, he had to be Superman, Batman, Hulk, all mixed together, and it still wasn't enough. The game was 31-9. It was just Tom Brady. This offense did just enough on their side of things, and the defense dominated. And the Chiefs really had to play from behind the entire game. They just didn't really have a chance. And this reminds me of that same exact situation where San Fran has the defense to be in your face, play that aggressive style, and get to the quarterback with their pass rushers. Even though, Amir, there's reports that Chase Young might be benched here in this game because of his
Good.
production the last couple of weeks. But I just think San Fran, that defense reminds me of that Tampa Bay unit where they have a good defensive line, really solid everywhere. I mean, the worst group is probably the cornerbacks. But if you
Yeah.
want to say the cornerbacks are the worst group, the Chiefs' worst probably position on offense is the receivers, at least at this stage in the NFL season. But I will differ. This is a team that we've said since you first joined the podcast that if Mahomes wins this Super Bowl this year, we got to start talking about him as a GOAT
Yeah.
conversation. And now the general media, of course, is picking up. Now that everyone's having those conversations. We've been saying that since week 4.
Exactly.
So, but I'm not going to bet against the best player in football, and that's really all it comes down to. I think the Chiefs. Am I confident in this? No. Would I bet my house on this? No. I wouldn't even bet this podcast on it, and I don't even make money off it yet, right? But I just think when it comes down to it, this is a team that wants to be a dynasty. They have 2 Super
Yeah.
Bowls. This could be their 3rd, and I think Patrick Mahomes, this is a perfect situation for him to come out, be the best player on the field, and dominate this game from start to finish. And I think if the Chiefs, with my Super Bowl MVP prediction, if they can control this clock, I really think that this is a game that, 1, could cement them in that GOAT conversation, but 2, I just think that it would build a dynasty for the Chiefs, and I think that could just be that added motivation. I don't know though, because San Fran has, everything we thought was wrong with them coming into the postseason, where if they get behind early, they lose the game. They've shown me 2 weeks in a row against good opponents that that's not the case when it matters most. But any additional thoughts here about this game, Amir? I'm going to roll with the Chiefs, a team I've rolled with all playoffs. Any additional thoughts here before we move on here?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I'm concerned about is Sanford running a lot of zone coverage. What they like to do. I mean, and you can also see against Mahomes when teams run zone coverage. I mean, it's game over. So I think San Fran's going to have to run a lot of tight man-to-man coverage. Try their best to apply pressure on Mahomes. I mean, because the last thing you want him to do, the dude already doesn't take any sacks. He's already comfortable when he's blitzed. So the last thing you want to do is allow him to just sit there and just read zones, dice people up. Allow Kelsey to cook underneath. And I think for Kansas City, they're going to kind of try to play similar to Green Bay, come out to smash mouth football. As great as Mahomes is, I mean, the key to winning this game is going to be dominating up front. I've been saying this, for a minute. If you can block San Fran, you can beat them. And you saw the past 2 weeks, Detroit dominated them up front. Absolutely was dominating that D-line. You go into the second half, all that was completely shut down. San Fran came back. Green Bay, the same exact thing. For 90% of the game, they dominated them up front. I mean, that San Fran D-line looked like they were a full D-line full of just free agents. Like, it was terrible. That fourth quarter hit later in the game, and Green Bay stopped getting movement. And I think for this game is going to be key for Kansas City. If Kansas City can't block San Fran, I think San Fran's going to win.
Yeah, absolutely. That is Super Bowl 58, ladies and gentlemen, and hopefully great game this weekend. Of course, if you want to drop your predictions, hot takes, and more in the comments, please do. We'd love to read what you guys have to think. And of course, we react and we respond to each and every comment as quickly as we possibly can. But then we get into our top 10 players. This is something we did last week. Very controversial, Amir. However, we're gonna bring it back because I did this last year with Bakari as he was on the podcast at the time. But every single Super Bowl, I'd like to just dive in. It's just something else we can look into. Who are the top 10 players heading into the biggest game of the season? And here we're going to start it off with the same top 2 that we had last week or 2 weeks ago with Patrick Mahomes and Christian McCaffrey, two guys that are in the MVP running. Patrick Mahomes, of course, I would say consensus best player in football. So rightfully so, he's number one here. And then Christian McCaffrey, a guy that, it might be a hot take that he's here at number two because he's a running back and he has a great offensive line. I just think that this team is not where they're at without Christian McCaffrey. And that's one of those.
Not at all.
I think that it's a trade that, got coverage. But I think the more and more time goes on, I think it's very underrated. But your thoughts here about the top two players, anything you would change?
No, I mean, CMC, in my opinion, I mean, it's the only running back in the league that's irreplaceable. He's the only running back, in my opinion, that you can't, straight up get rid of. And if you were to get rid of him, you will see an immediate impact.
At least star caliber backs.
Yeah, exactly. I think, at the state of football, seeing backs being replaced, teams still being able to thrive. I mean, look at Pacheco, for example. I mean, Pacheco got drafted late, was completely overlooked. But, as long as you have a high motor and you can run hard, I mean, as a running back in the NFL, I mean, you can make plays. But McCaffrey brings so much more value, so much more value.
I don't think I've ever seen a running back run as hard as Pacheco.
Nah, not at all.
Even when we go back in the day to guys like Michael Turner and, Mike Allstott, maybe Mike Allstott's the toughest runner since Isaiah Pacheco. But before we move on to the list, I think this is a good spot for, us to break away here. Have you seen the noise about, these NFL players giving their top 10 running back or top 5 running backs in the league list? Guys like Breece Hall and Jahmyr Gibbs?
No, I haven't seen this.
I'm telling you. So I think Jahmyr Gibbs, I don't have the video on me, so I'm going to go off the top of my head. Both guys, Breece Hall and Jahmyr Gibbs, had each other either 1 or 2 in their list, okay? But then after that, Derrick Henry was like number 5, okay? I understand that he's getting older. I'll say I think Jahmyr Gibbs had Christian McCaffrey at 5. I think he had him as the 5th best running back in the league, behind guys like Saquon, behind Jahmyr Gibbs himself, behind Breece Hall. And Breece Hall had a similar list where I think Breece Hall did have Christian McCaffrey at number 1. I could have those reversed. But the point I'm getting at here is guys like Nick Chubb had no love. He wasn't even on their list.
Wow.
And I think as Browns fans, we could be biased. I don't know. You guys let us know at home. I think Nick Chubb is no doubt the second best running back in the league. Of course, that is up for debate, but I just he's another one of those running backs where you put Nick Chubb on this past Browns team, even with Joe Flacco, I think we at least make the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. Easily.
Even with a banged up O-line. But I don't know, man. I'll have to send you the video after the fact. But you guys definitely know what I'm talking about at home. Drop those lists in the comments also, because it's crazy how disrespectful these NFL players can get. But I guess, hey, what do I know? I'm sitting here in a chair. They're out there making millions playing the game they love. At 3 and 4, we have the same 2 players, but they're flip-flopped. Fred Warner, Trent Williams in that order for me. You have the opposite there with Trent Williams at 3, Fred Warner at 4. What I'm getting at here, though, is that San Fran's dominating the top 4. But your thoughts here about 3 and 4, 2 players that arguably are the best at their given positions.
Yeah, I mean, I kept this the same as from last week, and I think they're both, the best at the positions. Except last week I had Lions fans attack me and say, "Oh, Sewell should be over Trent Will because PFF says this and says that." Man, no, I think Trent Will is the best O-lineman in the league, the best tackle in the league, to be specific. And San Fran, people look at San Fran's team as a whole, and they say, "Oh, the O-line has to be good." But I mean, statistically, San Fran has like the 20th ranked O-line. I mean, San Fran, you can even see. I mean, Green Bay and Detroit absolutely were dominating them at times, absolutely dominating them, making the O-line as an entirety look embarrassing. Sending pressure, getting there. And the only thing that's saving San Fran from somewhat being productive is the fact that they run a lot of zone blocking schemes. And I think if you were to take Trent Will off that O-line, the O-line as a whole is not good.
Yeah. And then Fred Warner, of course, a 3rd-round pick. Many forget that he plays like the best middle linebacker in the game. And he was a 3rd-round pick. So shout out to San Fran for drafting and getting guys that fit their scheme. But Fred Warner, best zone coverage linebacker in the game. And overall, he does everything that a middle linebacker, does, for a team, at least at the highest level, where he makes the plays needed. He calls out the plays. He's one of the best coverage linebackers I've ever seen, let alone here in the modern day NFL. I think, of course, he deserves his flowers, and that's a word that you guys have said I say a lot. But 3 and 4, rightfully so. There's not much argument why these 2 guys are here. At number 5, we have George Kittle. This might be a hot take, but I think he is at least a little bit better than Travis Kelce. We've
I
seen
think so.
Travis Kelce turn back the clock in this playoff run, Amir. But just throughout the year, and I think, of course, Kelsey's getting a little bit older. I think Kittle, even though his stats might not always say, "Hey, I'm the best tight end in the league," I think just his impact on the game today, and the fact that he brings, he's the most well-rounded tight end I've seen in a long
Yeah.
time. So for that reason, maybe since Gronk, he's the most well-rounded tight end since Gronk. I just think he's the best tight end in the game at this point in time. But who knows? I guess Kelsey could also come out and have a 13 reception day and prove us both wrong. But you seem to believe the same. George Kittle's a little bit
Yeah.
better. Your thoughts here about George Kittle?
I think George Kittle was the best tight end in the league, and I had a debate about this, last week with some other Lions fans that Laporta was better this year, and I'm looking at George Kittle, and I'm looking at this San Fran offense. I'm like, you mean to tell me that George Kittle, who has all this other talent in the offense to take away from his production, the fact that this dude still put up 1,000 yards receiving and only 60 receptions as a tight end, I mean that's absolutely absurd. On top of the fact that he's arguably the best blocking tight end in the league. I mean, you have him out
No
there. It's like
doubt.
having
No
another
doubt.
lineman in the game. Like George Kittle brings so much more value to the offense, to this San Fran offense. And last year he was obviously banged up at times, and this year being able to see the entirety of him fully being healthy, I think when you look at him and Kelsey throughout this entire season, George Kittle has been far more productive.
Yeah, I mean, he's the second best tight end in the league behind David Njoku, from what we've seen as Brown fans this
Hey,
year.
true, right?
At number 6, we have Taylor Swift or Travis Kelce, whatever you want to say. But of course, Travis
I'm
Kelce.
just not noticing that.
We just talked about it, but of course, if he's not number 1, he's number 2, or if he's not 1A, he's 1B. Travis Kelce's
Yeah,
right there, still top of the league, even at his age. And I forgot to mention it about Trent Williams, but there's rumors if Trent Williams and San Fran win this game, it might be his last game.
yeah.
Same can be said here about Travis Kelce. We know in interviews he said, "Hey, I still got 2 or 3 years left in me." However, can you imagine the storylines, right? Jason Kelce, Travis Kelce, first brother duo to ever enter the Hall of Fame same year, 6 years down the line. I can already see the writing on the wall. So if Travis Kelce wins, I would not be shocked. He's been to 4 Super Bowls. He's won 3 of them. If he wins this one, I can see. Hey, I was here with Alex Smith, stayed for Patrick Mahomes. We dominated. I was able to get a dynasty with this franchise. Let's hang it up, right? Let's hang it up and go enjoy Taylor Swift's money. Is a good way to put it. But any additional thoughts here about 87?
No, I mean, I think 6 is perfectly fine for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then at number 7, someone that I didn't have on my list, but of course was in my honorable mentions, a guy that I wanted to
Yeah.
include in the list last week, in Creed Humphrey. Of course, arguably the best center in today's game. Your thoughts here about the big man?
I was gonna put him at 6. I decided to show him some love, put him in the top 10. And I think O linemen are undervalued and not talked about enough. Which I believe I should have put Sewell in my top 10 last week. I think Creed Humphreys is good right there. I mean, some people could even argue, he could be in that 6th or that 5th spot.
Yeah.
I think 7 is just perfect though.
Yeah, no, I really love that you showed some love
Yeah.
to the big man up front, the guys that don't get the recognition they deserve. At 8 and 9 for you, 7 and 9 for me, we have Nick Bosa and Brock Purdy. Of course, you're a bigger Brock Purdy fan than me, and you don't have to dive into him too much. We all know at home, Mr. Relevant, and he's been anything but that so far in his NFL career. Nick Bosa, on the other hand, is a guy that, statistically wise, has not been exactly what you would expect. But we know the talent is there, and he could find himself in a situation where he wins Super Bowl 58 MVP if he can get after Mahomes enough times and cause enough pressure. But your thoughts about these two San Francisco 49ers as they just continue to keep getting top 10 players in this list?
Yeah, I mean, San Fran is absolutely loaded, which, is why kind of gives me a little hope going into this week. As good as Casey is, I think all their strengths, San Fran has, something to kind of counter against that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then at number 8 for me, number 10 for you, we have Chris Jones, a guy that's we will admit it was a mistake on our part. We
Yeah.
just forgot about Chris Jones last week when we had all 4 teams or 2 weeks ago when we had to look into those teams. We just left him off the list, and it was definitely an accident. And of course, we heard about it. But Chris Jones, rightfully so, we did not forget about it this week, and he made both of our top 10s, maybe the best interior defensive lineman in the game. Of course, Aaron Donald is still around. So, of course, maybe you can't say he's number 1 yet. But Chris Jones, any thoughts here about the big man up front? Amir, of course, if this was Madden, he would no doubt be number 1.
Oh yeah, I mean Chris Jones was absolutely insane in Madden. You know what I mean, but Chris Jones, you know, he hasn't been, you know, productive at like in recent years. But I mean, I still think he's the best interior D lineman in the game. You know, him and Aaron Donald are like right there, in my opinion. As Aaron Donald gets older, and I think Chris Jones is perfectly right here. You know, I wanted to kind of put a receiver in there, put Ayuk in there, possibly, but you know, I think Chris Jones, you know, just earns that spot over him.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Jones, a big game for him, not only because he could also be a part of this dynasty for the Chiefs, but he is an impending free agent. So this is a
Yeah.
game where he can come out and if he shows out, maybe let's say hypothetically wins Super Bowl 58 MVP, I think the Chiefs are going to be pigeonholed. I don't know if they want to pay him as much money as he wants, as he does get older as well, but you're going to have to if he puts up a performance like that. But regardless, again, he's definitely, if he's not one, he's number two in that position rankings. And then I cheated a little bit here. Of course, I had the luxury to see you show some love to Creed Humphrey. So I didn't have him as an honorable mention, but at number 10, I wanted to show some love either to L'Jarius Sneed, one of the most underrated corners in the league, or a guy like Brandon Ayuk, who I think is the best receiver there in San Fran. And I guess that might also be a hot take, but I think L'Jarius Sneed, Brandon Ayuk, of two other guys that we could definitely mention in this list. But Amir,
Tarvarius Ward possibly too.
Tarvarius Ward, let's not forget about the Cleveland Browns legend, Tashawn Gibson. Tashawn Gibson. Of course, we can't forget about Sam Darnold either, Amir. He's number 11 on my list. Okay, I'm just joking. But any last thoughts here about the top 10 players before we get into some hot takes here?
I mean, no, I think some of these are interchangeable. I think it's a better list than last week because last week I don't know what we were thinking. We forgot some names in there.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess that can happen when you have four different teams and 88 different qualifying players really that couldn't make the list.
Exactly.
And that's not even an exaggeration. But then we get into our hot take here. And going into this weekend, I guess I should have mentioned at the beginning of the episode for my bettors out there that San Francisco is favored by 2 points in this matchup. I think the Chiefs not only are going to win this game, but I think they're going to win by double digits. And you know why? Is because, look, San Fran, you mentioned it. They're loaded. They have maybe the best, if you line up position by position, they might have the better overall group at every position but one or two at quarterback and kicker. Head coach is arguable. That can go to Kyle Shanahan as well. So to me, look, the NFL is weird. Everything says that San Fran should come into this game. They can be able to do enough, and they should be able to win this game. But again, the NFL is weird. Patrick Mahomes, being the best player in this game, could be all that Kansas City needs. And of course, who doesn't love a Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce getting all the spotlight? But I'm going to go with Kansas City winning this game not only by 2 points, but I think they're going to win by double digits. So I'm going to say maybe by a touchdown or two. Maybe they score, then they get a turnover and score again late in the game. However it's done, I think they're going to win by double digits in this ball game. But Amir, your thoughts here about your hot take for this week. And it kind of plays in part with your next Super Bowl 58 opinion here. But your thoughts here about your hot take.
Yeah, I think San Fran's going to run this offense completely through Christian McCaffrey. And, as good as KC's defense is, as good as, defenses in the league are, I mean, nobody has been able to completely shut down Christian McCaffrey except for the best team of football, the Browns. But, I think, McCaffrey's going to, get targeted in the air and on the ground. And so that's why I have him at 3 TDs. He's going to impact both. And, in reality, if San Fran doesn't run the offense through him, I mean, it's game over. So I think they're going to have to rely on him.
Do you remember who scored the first touchdown in this first Super Bowl matchup back then?
In 2019 or 2020?
Yeah, in 2019. Do you remember who scored the first touchdown in that game?
Who scored the first touchdown? Was it actually I don't remember. Wait.
It is Kyle Juszczyk.
It was Juszczyk when he flipped in the end zone.
Yeah,
it was
Juszczyk. Yeah. It was like a little shovel pass, but he got in there. Shout out to Juszczyk. Of course, he's from Ohio, so shout out to him. And then we get into our Super Bowl 58 MVP. Like you mentioned, they were Christian McCaffrey. I think the Chiefs, we know with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, they've been this high-powered passing offense with all the creative mind behind, of course, Andy Reid. I think this year is going to have to be a little bit different, and we've seen that all year. I think Isaiah Pacheco is going to have a huge game for Kansas City to dominate the way I think they can. And I think Pacheco, of course, I will say this too, for you, of course, if Christian McCaffrey has 3 touchdowns, he's the runaway. But ultimately, we didn't want to really go with quarterbacks because we know 9 times out of 10, if these teams win the game, Patrick Mahomes or Brock Purdy are going to be the MVP of this game. So we want to stay away from that. And
Yeah.
I went with Pacheco just because I think he's going to have to be a big play in this game. And he's going to have to come out from the start of the game, show that 110% Russell Westbrook energy, and of course, set the tone for the Kansas City Chiefs. But your thoughts here about your Super Bowl 58 MVP?
They the same logic I gave for Pacheco. Kansas City's going to run the ball. Start off running the offense. Somewhat through him. Kind of like what Detroit and Green Bay did for the running backs the past 2 weeks, and San Fran the same exact way. It's going to be who can control the clock better. Kansas City's going to control the block, control the clock how they did last week against Baltimore, and that's why they won. And I think that's going to be the key for them in this game. They feed Pacheco the ball.
So that is our hot take and Super Bowl MVP. Let's get into some prop bets, Amir. Of course, I don't know if you do much of these at home, but on my family or in my family, we do these a lot. Of course, we make I every single year you see it. I make a Super Bowl board every year, and of course, I also throw together some prop bets. We put money in the pot and everything, but some prop bets here for the game. I'm just gonna go rapid fire through these. I want your opinion on it, and of course, stop me if you have any questions. But coin toss, do you think it's gonna be heads or tails in this game?
Heads.
Heads. I've always been heads too. I don't.
Heads, always
Yeah.
heads.
People say tails never fails. No matter if it's mad in real life, I've always been a heads kind of guy. And the national anthem, do you think it's gonna be over or under 2 minutes? I'm not even sure who's singing it this year, but this is, of course, is a really important question for those casual fans.
I'm gonna go ahead and say
I probably should
I'm
have
gonna
did
go
my
ahead
due
and say
diligence under.
under, yeah.
I think the recent years it's been under each and or most of the time at least because the line's never at 2 minutes. It's usually like 2 minutes and 15 seconds, whatever it is. But I will agree with you here. Who do you think scores the first touchdown though? Of course, like I mentioned, a guy like Kyle Juszczyk, a fullback, has scored the first touchdown in a game like the Super Bowl before. Who do you think gets the first touchdown in this matchup here between, of course, the Niners and the Kansas City Chiefs?
I think for the first touchdown, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and say George Kittle.
George Kittle. I'll go out there. I'll go out there a little bit. I'll say Rashee Rice. But wouldn't it be crazy if the Floridian himself, Kadarius Toney,
That would be
returns and
crazy.
if Kadarius Toney comes back and he has another like historic Super Bowl performance, I don't even care. I'm gonna start mentioning that dude as a top 10 receiver. Just because he
That would
shows
be
up
insane.
because he shows up when it matters most, right? And then the
Yeah.
turnover battle. Who do you think's going to win that one here? Of course, two defenses that generate a lot of turnovers, two of the best defenses overall in the NFL. Who do you think's going to win that turnover battle here in the Super Bowl? Because that could be all the difference.
I think Casey will. Even though Casey has some young players, that's in the core of their offense. That are more prone to possibly, making mistakes. I think Casey's going to win this turnover battle. I mean, their defense is playing the best in the playoffs, in my opinion, up to this point. And also, San Fran, I think Brock Purdy is, more likely to turn the ball over than Mahomes. I mean, Mahomes hasn't thrown a pick, this playoffs. I don't think he threw a pick last playoffs either. And so, I think Mahomes is going to take care of the football.
Yeah, I mean, if Brock Purdy did, it was definitely in that NFC title game where he didn't have an arm after like the second drive of the
Oh,
game
yeah.
against the Philadelphia Eagles. But I will agree with you here. Kansas City definitely has to be favored. I can't see Mahomes turning the ball over more than once, but it could also happen in other ways, like Pacheco fumbling or MVS, of course, dropping a pass that's wide open and falls into a San Francisco defensive player's lap. But how about Gatorade color? I should have also did my due diligence and went back and looked at all the Gatorade colors for Kansas City. But yeah, I mean, I don't really want to do that. Last year, I will say that it was purple for the Kansas City Chiefs. If that's going to sway your opinion at all, when they won, it was purple. This year, I'm going to go out there because it's not always a team color. Purple might be the best answer because I think quarterback Patrick Mahomes probably gets to pick what Gatorade they get.
Yeah.
I'll go with green. I'll go with green, my favorite color, whatever. I'm going to throw it out there, and I don't think we've seen that in a long time. But what do you think the Gatorade color is going to be, depending on who you think is going to win?
Yeah, actually, I was going to go purple because, a lot of teams are superstitious. And it's kind of like, you won last year. So you go into this game and you kind of like, this is going to be a repeat of last year. So we're going to do the same thing, purple Gatorade color, and rock with it.
Purple is just a weird color for a team that wears white, black, and red. But
Right.
then let's get into some actual game props for the game, Amir. Of course, these are for the avid bettors. Do you think Mahomes has over or under 260 passing yards in this matchup? I'm going to say under. That might be a hot
Yeah.
take, but I could see him going around that 220 range.
Yeah, I was going to say under. I was thinking around 240, 250.
Yeah.
That's because like we've been saying, the Chiefs' offense isn't as high powered as it used to be, and KC's going to play just like how they did last week, run the ball, control the clock, and pretty much just play slow and play at their own pace.
Yeah, I mean, Travis Kelce doesn't have 13 receptions in the game if they're not playing it slow and playing it at a slower
Right.
pace than we're accustomed to. But speaking about Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift will be in attendance. Of course, if she can make the flight over from a foreign country, I forget which one it was. I think it's Japan, whatever the case is. Kelce, do you think he's going to have over or under 7.5 receptions with guys like Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner on his back tail?
I'm gonna go ahead and say over. I think KC's gonna target him at least like 15 times. I think I think for Kelce, it's the biggest game of the year. He's obviously out here saying this means more to him than any other Super Bowl he's played in. I think for this game, if Mahomes wants to trust anybody, it's gonna be him. I mean, he's not gonna trust anybody else on the third down, on a second and long, but Kelce. And so I think Kelce's gonna have over 7.5 receptions.
Maybe Kadarius Toney. Of course, that's an argument
Who?
there. But then we move over to Isaiah Pacheco here. Of course, my Super Bowl 58 dark horse. And the over-under line for him is 67.5 rushing yards. Amir, we've talked about it for Pacheco, McCaffrey, everybody involved, that we think whoever's going to win this game is going to control the ground. They're going to control the line of scrimmage. And, of course, whoever can get more time of possession, more likely, is going to win this game. So Isaiah Pacheco, 67.5 rushing yards. I think if he's going to, in my world, win the MVP, I'm going to say he at least gets 85 to 100 and a couple scores. So I'm going to say over this line, but I could see either way. What do you think here about the madman Isaiah Pacheco?
Yeah, I was gonna say over just because the San Fran D-line has struggled to stop the run in the past couple weeks, and so I think because of that, because KC, it's kind of switching their mantra, switching their offense up to kind of attack the ground, and then we'll attack the air. I think Pacheco's gonna go off this game.
Yeah, hopefully he does. Mizzou guy there. Even though I'm not a big Mizzou guy, I might pick them Amir for my NCAA rebuild when that game finally comes out. Maybe, who knows? Maybe I can introduce some gaming, or maybe even we'll make a gaming channel here when a game like that comes out. But then we move over to Christian McCaffrey. This one's a little bit more tricky. I know you can bet your life mortgage. Of course, the age-old saying, death, taxes, and blank. Well, you can really say McCaffrey's going to score an anytime touchdown. He's going to score on a given game. But do you think he gets over or under 90.5 rushing yards against the top two defense here in the NFL?
I was gonna say under, but if you're betting on this line, be very careful. I would personally avoid this because this is a really, really close line. And this team's defense is great. The Niners are obviously playing great, force feeding McCaffrey the ball, but for me, I'm expecting them to kind of throw the ball to McCaffrey through the air rather than, just rushing the ball all game. And man, this is really, really close. Really close. I'm gonna say under.
Yeah, I'm going to say under too. I'm going to say, he hovers around that 65, 70 mark. I think, like you mentioned there, he's going to do a lot of his damage through the air. But, who knows? That's when he was the most dangerous there in Carolina, when he was doing everything for the Carolina offense. It seems like forever ago he was a Panther, by the way, and it's only been like a year. But a trade like that can really change a career trajectory, is a good way to put it. But then here's a fun one. I could have went with passing yards. I could have went with total tackles or who's going to get more interceptions. I wanted to go with a fun one here. In Brock Purdy, over under a mere 12.5 rushing yards.
I'm going to go ahead and say over.
It's over. I thought that was the consensus, right? Going over. But then I was reading up on it, and apparently he hasn't hit this mark in like the last 7 weeks, right? I think he's only hit it like once in the last 10 weeks or something. So I could see why, because it's one scramble that can really get this done. And especially with the weapons they have. But regardless, I think that's a fun one. Even if you want to, bettors at home, if you want to throw $2-3 on a game on a thing like that, Brock Purdy, getting this mark, it could be, nice little turnout there for you. But that is gonna do it. Amir, of course, you joined us. I don't know if it was week 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. It was definitely before that mark. But you have joined us for a long period of this season, so I want to thank you, of course. But the Super Bowl, it's right around the corner. Hopefully, the best part of the NFL season is in front of us. Hopefully, it's not a blowout either way. But you've joined us for at least 14, 15 weeks to this point. So thank you for your time throughout the NFL season. And I was just talking to Amir before we restarted this one. Of course, I'm too cheap to buy Zoom Plus. Um, Not only, the NFL season is coming to an end for you guys at home. However, and for all of us, but we're gonna have a lot more fun things coming. Of course, I mentioned it last Thursday. Last year, when the NFL season ended, I kind of just strayed away from the NFL. I didn't do an NFL episode for up to a month or so, really just dialing in on the NBA. And I understand that not everybody likes the NBA as much as I do. So, from this year, I'm going to do my absolute best that every single week, at least for the next month, I'm going to have an NFL podcast still each and every Thursday. Of course, this week was a little bit different with the trade deadline. But Amir, your thoughts here about this NFL season and any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, this has been a great season. It's been more of a defensive season. From the casual eye, it's probably not been the most entertaining, but from my real true football fans, I love to see competitive football. I love to see upsets. That kind of love to see more of an even playing field throughout the year. I think this is a great season, and kind of seeing NFL defenses adjust, kind of seeing teams play a lot more physical, and seeing the hope and the promise and hope of guys like Jordan Love, Stroud, these young quarterbacks and stuff like that, and Brock Purdy, these young guys. I think going into next year, and I was just talking about it, man. The AFC next year is going to be absolutely loaded. I mean, the NFC is going to be loaded too. I mean, like next year might be the greatest football season ever. I mean, the AFC. I mean, you're going to have Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, C.J. Stroud, Lamar, Deshaun Watson's going to be back. You'll have, the Dolphins are going to be in there. The Chargers are going to be back, but Herbert's going to be healthy as well. It's going to be a great season next year. I'm excited.
Yeah. And like you mentioned there, there's going to be a lot of talent back in the NFL next year. And so in 2 weeks here, of course, next week, we're going to do some playoff awards, kind of recapping the season, giving us some of your favorite moments, all that good stuff. But then the following week, Amir, we might rank the top 3 to 5 players at each and every position. That's going to do nothing but cause controversy. And then after that, of course, if you want, and for you guys at home, a lot of mock drafts are coming to the channel. This year, I'm doing more deep diving than ever. So, Amir, if you're ever interested, of course, you're welcome. But this Thursday, last thing before we get out of here, I will be going live for the NBA trade deadline either at 1 or 2 o'clock. Of course, it'll go to about 3 p.m., which is when the NBA trade deadline happens. But that is, of course, this Thursday. Of course, if you enjoyed, you made it this far, drop a like, subscribe. On the road to 15,000. That's going to do it. We'll see you guys next week.